Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F Podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. And today, welcome to Take 2 for Episode 1, which got nowhere near what we were supposed to be talking about. So I wanted to talk about Napoleon Hill being tied to the occult, because I have a bit of an emotional attachment. Not so much, that's a little strong. I read Napoleon Hill quite a bit in my early years, thinking it was a good business book. It turns out he is actually into the occult and into this thing kind of called New Thought, I guess, which is like a hybridization of New Age and Christianity. It's the kind of thing that Kenneth Copeland teaches and some prosperity preachers teach and Joel Osteen teaches. But it's like bled into everything, not just like, word of faith movements or anything like that. So, and a lot of it starts with Napoleon Hill. And this was, I said in the first episode before we got completely derailed, I said I feel a little bit like Buzz Lightyear throwing himself off the stairs. And, when he hits his head and Woody finds him later, he screams, "Years of academy training wasted." So I'm feeling very disillusioned because I feel like I wasted a bunch of time reading occultist, basically. So, but this was very educational, nonetheless. And I wanted to, do I still have her book pulled up? I do. So I wanted to recommend Melissa Dotrie's book, Happy Lies. I read it. It was very good. It talks a lot about this New Thought stuff. And I was very, very grateful for her putting out a video on this topic regarding Napoleon Hill. Because it's like, a part of me knew. I don't know if you've ever been through this. Have you ever, kind of known something but didn't want to know something, so you kind of just buried it and you didn't think about it too hard? That's kind of where I was at with him. Because looking back, he says stuff like, he talks about having his, spiritual, imaginary cabinet where he would, have a bunch of he would use his imagination. He would sit down and he would imagine, a bunch of historical figures in a room talking together, which was kind of dumb because you're like, okay, I don't think Jesus and Voltaire would get along if they were in the same room, but whatever.
Jesus got along with everybody.
Voltaire did not. Voltaire was quite cantankerous, in my opinion. So I don't know if you ever read Candide or not, but anyway, that's a whole thing.
I can't read. I'm just kidding.
Anyway, so before we go on, Sow and Reap says, Jeremiah 14:11, then said the Lord unto me, pray not for this people, for their good, pray him, pray. So,
good,
yeah. So that was in reference to the previous episode where we're talking about prayer. Anyway, but then Napoleon Hill says that one night he woke up, and he wasn't sure if he was dreaming or not, but he said he might have been awake, basically. And he sits up, and he sees Abraham Lincoln at the foot of his bed. And and then he's like, Abraham Lincoln was like, your work is important. Go on. And looking back, I'm like, that's not Abraham Lincoln. That was Satan. Don't talk to it.
Well, kind of the same thing. Abraham Lincoln got income tax put in, so just saying.
That was Woodrow Wilson. So.
Well, he rebranded it. Abraham Lincoln was the original propagator of that.
For income tax?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I think that was Woodrow Wilson, but we're digressing. We don't.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to talk about Napoleon Hill. Cody, do you know anything about Napoleon Hill?
No, but he kind of sounds like is it kind of like, you know who Neville Goddard is? Is it kind of that kind of same thing?
He's self-help though, like positive thinking, manifestations, affirmations, that kind of thing. So this guy you're referring to is the same way?
Yeah, I do think it is. It's the way the world works. It's the way this realm functions. But like I said in the previous episode, you don't know what you need.
Okay.
So
no.
You're gonna get what you're asking for, but you don't know what you actually need.
Gotcha. Yeah. So he's the granddaddy of that whole movement. Napoleon Hill is one of the granddaddies, and I guess it's crazy though because the dude's recommended by everybody. Like Dave Ramsey recommends him. Like people that wouldn't even be tied to the prosperity gospel or like word of faith movement type stuff. Like they would still recommend
It's true.
him.
It does work. I mean,
I don't know if it does, but even if it does
And
work,
same
it's
thing Oral
cultic.
Roberts was teaching.
Yeah, but
the way
we
the
did the
realm
Oral
functions.
Roberts one though. Like that was clearly. We still don't know where he went in the car. That was clearly not great. So okay, let's just start Melissa Doughtry's Napoleon Hill Unmasked: Lies, Scams, Cults, and Occult Beliefs. So here we go.
Think of a famous business guru. If you can think of them, Napoleon Hill has probably influenced them. This is a variety of people, from self-help coaches like Tony Robbins, Dan Locke, Les Brown, Grant Cardone, Tai Lopez, just to name a few. But there's also other people who are famous entrepreneurs like Jennifer Lopez, Bob Proctor, Will Smith, Damon John from Shark Tank, Oprah Winfrey, which been there, done that, made a video about it. But Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich has also influenced people who have influenced Christians. People like John C. Maxwell and Charles Stanley, just to name a few. These are big names, and I actually admire and respect both of these men. But this explains why a book that was written in the 1900s stays on the bestseller list every year, or in the self-help or self-transformation section at your local bookstore, and sell well in Christian spaces. That should show the power of the philosophy and teachings in this book, which are also infused with New Thought teachings, which I will cover more of that in part 3. But who is Napoleon Hill? And you know something? When I put together this biography, I thought that this was going to be straightforward. I thought this was going to be simple and boring. But no, that is not what happened. This is not a regular biography. I was very, very surprised that in my research, Napoleon Hill is not always who he claimed to be. And this can be very typical with people that we put up on pedestals when it comes to their teachings that really work for us, which causes us to ignore the other things in their life that might be problematic. It's the classic case of, oh, let's just ignore the negative things and only see the positive because this person has done so many good things. This is how people are not held accountable, and time is the best tattletale, I always say, and oh my, has it told on Napoleon Hill. So there are 2 biographies of Napoleon Hill. There's the official biography that's straightforward, clean and pristine, written by the Napoleon Hill Foundation, which exists to promote personal development and success principles through the education and the publications and programs based on Napoleon Hill's philosophies. And I'm sure their official biography that they approved in 1995 is completely and totally unbiased in their portrayal of Napoleon Hill. So that's the first biography. And then, thanks to court documents, other accounts, and newspaper articles, there's the biography that adds the stuff to his life that perhaps a lot of his disciples don't like very much. So they either downplay or downright ignore. So let's go over the basic biography first. Oliver Napoleon Hill was born on October 26, 1883 in a one-room cabin in Pound, Virginia. His father's name was James, and he was an unlicensed dentist and moonshiner on the side. His mother's name was Sarah.
Gangster.
And I was surprised to know that Napoleon's name isn't Napoleon, but Oliver. Either way,
It's not as dramatic, Oliver. Bit of a downgrade. I'd have changed my name too.
Yeah.
they both make great cat names. So he didn't change his name to Napoleon until 1908. Now, remember the year 1908, as I will give some very important context to this a little later. His early life was not easy. He grew up in poverty, and after his mother passed away when he was 9, his father remarried, and Hill credited his stepmother, Martha, with encouraging him to pursue education and was a source of encouragement for him. She bought him a typewriter and encouraged him to write. This was probably one of the more pivotal times in his life because this carried over into him writing for newsletters. But unfortunately, before he was even 13 years old, he became an orphan, as both of his parents had died at this point. As a result of his loss, he was known to be a rebellious child. Even so, he busied himself as a mountain reporter, doing articles for the local newspaper. And by the time he was 15, he was writing articles for many small town newspapers. He had a goal for himself. He was saving to go to law school to become a lawyer, but unfortunately, had to drop out because he couldn't afford it. He persevered throughout his life until he finally had the breakthrough that changed everything, which was a meeting with the great Andrew Carnegie. Napoleon was assigned to interview him, and it was in this meeting that Carnegie charged Hill with a 20-year challenge that changed his life. What resulted from this challenge and meeting was his most popular book that slammed America into the self-help movement, Think and Grow Rich. Carnegie's challenge was that if Napoleon would commit to 20 years without compensation to compile together the principles of success from the country's greatest businessmen and leaders, seeking out the common denominators of their stories of success, then he would introduce Napoleon to the most wealthy and successful men of the time. Napoleon, of course, took up the challenge, and over the next 20 years, he met and interviewed with over 500 successful men, many of them millionaires. He became an advisor to Andrew Carnegie and also an unpaid advisor to President Franklin Roosevelt from 1933 to 1936. He was married 5 times, had about 5 kids, and wrote numerous successful books on how to help you become the best version of yourself. He was a
Because somebody who's been married 5 times is going to help you do that. Just you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could say they learned through their mistakes. So maybe that.
Christian who taught Christian concepts, and people respected him as a Christian man. He passed away on November 8th, 1970 at the age of 87. There. That's the elevator version biography that is typically told. But there's a lot more to this story. So let's fill in those gaps. If you look at the website of the Napoleon Hill Foundation or flip through the completely, probably maybe unbiased official biography of Hill, it seems very impressive to see his supposed accomplishments. Not only did he have incredible meetings with all of these famous businessmen, it's said that he was an advisor to 2 presidents, Woodrow Wilson and Franklin D. Roosevelt. Napoleon even claimed that he came up with FDR's most famous phrase, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." But there's a big problem here. The biography that I just read with all of this impressive information is probably mostly garbage. Yes, Napoleon Hill most likely had a tough childhood and grew up in poverty. He did go to law school and he did write numerous books. But there are a few things from his life that they don't tell you in your self-help seminar or your MLM Boss Babe group chat. Napoleon Hill was a top-notch scam artist. But Napoleon Hill claimed to be a Christian. So in the Christian world, we have a more precise
You mean like
word
Oral
for this.
Roberts
A charlatan. I will
That is correct, sir.
or Brandon Biggs?
Shh. Well, I gotta agree with you now because, like, he did the. I'm gonna have to be like, well, you know, he's a little off on one particular topic that makes me less likely to believe him in others. But anyhow, that's like the end of it, though. That's the last episode. We'll get there. Yeah. We're not gonna stay here too long. I just wanted to get a couple examples in of how this guy lied.
Yeah.
And then we'll skip to the end because the occult stuff was what was really interesting to me.
Okay.
cover other specifics about his book, Think and Grow Rich, in part 2, because there are going to be some overlaps with this part. But for now, I'm going to focus on just his life in general and the unethical and scammy things that he did. Yes, Napster started writing early, but when he started writing for that newsletter at the age of 15, when he had no news to report, he would just make it up. I'm quoting this from his own biographers here. Napoleon soon became a prolific source of stories. His writing was unpolished, if not crude, but he compensated with unbounded verve and a vivid imagination. Indeed, he later recalled that when news was scarce and there weren't stories to tell, he simply made them up. Now, in case people don't know this, I mentioned this before, but there is something called the Napoleon Hill Foundation, not to be confused with the Napoleon Hill Institute. The institution is more of a global certified coaching division for Napoleon Hill's teachings. The foundation is a nonprofit educational foundation. It exists for no other reason than to continue the legacy and teachings of Napoleon Hill and his teachings and writings. And apparently, there are unpublished works from Napoleon Hill that they won't let anybody see. One of them is an unpublished autobiography that Napoleon Hill wrote that is the source material used for the official Napoleon Hill biography that was released in 1995 by the Napoleon Hill Foundation. This is pretty interesting and significant because the Napoleon Hill Foundation has only released their version of his autobiography, which I'm sure is totally and completely unbiased. But they won't let anybody else see the source material, which is, again, Napoleon Hill's own writings. So there's this secret archive that the Foundation won't let others see, and I find that very interesting. Do you remember in the boring biography that I said to remember the year 1908? Well, interestingly, in Napoleon Hill's official biography, which again is from the Napoleon Hill Foundation, there's a mysterious 5 years that's just missing. From the years of 1903 to 1908, there's just a blank space. But because the Napoleon Hill Foundation can't completely hide court documents and newspaper articles and, these paper trails, we can fill in the gaps. We know that between this time, he was actually married, and oh boy, if you are a Napoleon Hill admirer, you would probably want to skip these few years. This was his second marriage to a woman named Edith Whitman. They had a baby girl. They moved to Alabama, where Napoleon is involved in the lumber business. But for some reason, he decides to send his wife and daughter back to Virginia while he continues to live in Alabama. It turns out that throughout his marriage to Edith, the Napster was being quite naughty. He was visiting quite a few number of prostitutes in cities throughout the South. Not only this, his marriage to Edith was filled with violence and abuse. There was even a time where he took his young daughter from Edith without telling her and taking the baby to his mother and threatened Edith that he would never return her. But Edith, God bless her heart, went and got her child back and filed for divorce. She said that Napoleon was cruel, violent, and had a terrible temper. And there are some things here that I actually find incredibly disturbing to even share, like violent things that he did and said to his own daughter and the horrible threats that he would make to his wife. This was more than a case of just he said, she said, because when Napoleon was married to his fourth wife, Rosalie, he moved in with his son Blair, which apparently was one of his only children who would even talk to him at the time, but that didn't last long because Napster ended up scamming him too. But even though Blair let his dad stay with them in their own home, Napoleon would take out his temper on his son's wife, Vera. If you want to know all the details, all of my resources that I'm using for this video,
quite possibly. She probably wasn't part of his mental cabinet. So
video will be in the description for you to know more, but let me just say that it's pretty disturbing, so heads up. In 1908, a very important year, Napoleon Hill was arrested for fraud but was released, possibly due to insufficient evidence. However, the more serious issue was his involvement in shady practices at his lumber company. Napoleon purchased $10,000 to $20,000 worth of lumber on credit from suppliers across multiple states, but sold it quickly in Alabama at unusually low prices for cash. Now, of course, the buyers started to get suspicious and the local sellers were getting angry. So to hide the cash flow, Napoleon falsely claimed the money came from new investors, prompting his business partner to sell his share and leave the company. You following me so far? By late 1908, the news of Napoleon Hill's fraud spread throughout the lumber industry, and rather than face the consequences, he fled. What a dude. Nobody could find him. So they put out warrants for his arrest. And not only this, apparently he was also in trouble with the U.S. Postal Service for mail fraud. And the lumber company filed a lawsuit against him. So he fled to Washington, D.C. Again, in 1908 is when this happened. He completely reinvented himself and became a new man. Literally, because this is when Oliver N. Hill would start introducing himself by his middle name, Napoleon. And some people who might be watching who admire Napoleon Hill would think, so what? The guy made a few mistakes and he wanted to do better. And he did. He reinvented himself and even gave himself a new name to show how much of a changed man he was. Okay. Let's go with that. Then someone needs to explain to me if that's the narrative that people want to go with. Why was this left out of his totally and completely not biased official biography from the Napoleon Hill Foundation? If it's so virtuous,
That's a good question, Cody. Why is that?
Why was it left out?
Yes, why didn't they bring it up if it was a story of redemption or some such thing?
Because they want you to act like this guy.
Sell the illusion, huh? Well, let me ask you. You think they're selling the illusion, or you think they maybe it'll be more nefarious? Well, I'm not going to say that. I don't know if that's actually true. So you think they're just selling the illusion?
The devil wants you to act bad. So, I mean, and the devil is the establishment. So
There you go.
I mean, the establishment doesn't exist unless it's like prisons. They need people for prisons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. Turtle Chief, who is in Texas, is responding in the chat. He's asking, who is Napoleon Hill? We answered that twice because we've went on random diatribes. Napoleon Hill is author of one of the more famous self-help books, Think and Grow Rich, which I've read numerous times, and he has inspired many a self-help guru over the years. But it turns out he was an occult member, which is where we're getting. And why wouldn't they bring it up? Because it's embarrassing. Because he's supposed to be one of those super-duper Christian guys. Christians sell this book in their circles. And so the fact that this guy...
Really?
Yeah. That's why this is kind of a big deal. Dave Ramsey recommends him. This kind of nefarious, gossipy stuff is a little embarrassing for Christian culture. It's probably why they don't bring it up. But
I mean, it's the money is the root of all evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the love of money is the root of all evil. So it's you can't be a Christian and rich at the same time unless you somehow meld them together, right?
I think you can be rich and you can be a Christian. It's just a lot of people would rather be rich than a Christian. But
well, I mean, it's if it's God's will, yeah. But if it's not God's will for you to be rich, then if you think and try to grow rich, you're gonna have to force it eventually if that's not God's plan for you.
yeah, if it's not his plan for you. Of course, if it's not his plan
God's
for you,
will.
I don't know if you'd be able to be rich no matter what. But
Say again?
well, if it's not God's will for you to be rich, I don't know if you could be rich at all.
No, I think you can force it, but you have to impart the help of demons, which is what this guy was doing.
Yeah, well, considering his conversation with Abraham Lincoln, I would say that's right. Turtle Chief asks, what's a diatribe? A rant. A rant that has nothing to do with what the thumbnail says the show is about.
Trevor, you so crazy.
He's like, occults. That's the other thing he said.
I wish they had a cult flavored ice cream.
I don't know what that would taste like.
I don't either.
Tears,
Probably be
despair.
a hidden meaning. You know that's what that means, right?
Occult,
just means hidden.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, moving on. This was basically the idea. I wanted to establish that this guy, his record is questionable, and I think we've done that. So now we'll move on to the occult aspect of it.
For sure.
Part 3, yeah. So,
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what the occult part is.
the
yeah.
photographer. How long is your edit?
Hey, Adobe, commercial. Haha.
is significant.
All right. Oh, another one.
How come nobody
What,
told me before? I mean, my family, my neighbors.
All
Nobody told you because you suck.
And we're back.
There's a whole other element here that goes beyond the practical. This is also spiritual. A lot of people talk about Napoleon Hill as a con man and how wildly popular and useful his book is. But I don't see many people talk about the spiritual beliefs that go along with what he taught and why they are so problematic, especially for Christians. Probably because most people who have done expose videos on Napoleon Hill talk about his shady business dealings and lies, and honestly, after that fun adventure of part 1, who could really blame them? I'm so surprised that nobody's made a movie out of this man's life, but now that we've gone over that, we're going to touch on the spiritual side of Napoleon Hill, and in my opinion, this is really the heart of the issue. We've gone over just the synopsis of Think and Grow Rich, and some Christians read it and think, something is off here, but I don't know what it is. Other Christians read it and love it, thinking that it's biblical. That's because this isn't just a simple self-help book about becoming successful. This is a Trojan horse. This is a New Thought book written to sell you on an alternative spirituality. Now, you've heard me mention the term New Thought a few times in this deep dive, and for anything to make sense in this video, I need everybody to understand what New Thought is. If you've been keeping up with my videos the last few months, you'll know that this is definitely an annoying passion of mine. And I warned you, okay? I warned you that I'm here to annoy you forever and ever, amen, about New Thought. Because I'm just genuinely stunned how this belief system has flown under the radar in Christian culture for so long. But if you're new here, lean in really close to what I'm about to say, because everything that matters in this video has everything to do with the fact that Napoleon Hill isn't just some self-help guy that wrote a book that one time that sold millions. Napoleon Hill is part of the New Thought movement and is only one of the New Thought authors who is responsible for the foundation of the self-help movement. And trust me, New Thought is a mountain of a topic that I don't think I could cover enough in depth because it's a complicated web. I wrote an entire book called Happy Lies about New Thought, and only one of those chapters was about the self-help movement. But I easily could have written 3 to 4 times as much, but I hear that publishers frown upon that or something. I will leave more resources in the description about New Thought specifically for you to check out, as I won't be going over all of that here. And this will also include links to where you can find my book. But if you have read a self-help book like Think and Grow Rich, most likely you've been exposed to ideas from the New Thought movement. This is a 19th century spiritual movement and has found its way into the secular literature of the 21st century and the spiritual literature, with teachings like manifestation, the law of attraction, which is just barely scratching the surface. And it's the beliefs of New Thought that got. In 2 words, I would describe it as metaphysical Christianity. It's beyond the physical. It's a higher spiritual way of thinking, a better version of Christianity. So you'll hear Christian terms and even scriptures being quoted, but it's always understood in this different definition. In New Thought, your words and thoughts and emotions are actually what's real. And remember, the material world is a product of that. So that's what I mean by metaphysical. Now, Napoleon Hill, who also claimed to be a Christian, was one of many authors who adopted these ideas. He's one of a few New Thought authors who is largely responsible for introducing New Thought ideas into the self-help genre, where they became incredibly popular. Norman Vincent Peale, Dale Carnegie, and James Allen. Okay, there's just a few names, a few players here in this movement, in the self-help genre. And as I mentioned before in the synopsis, Hill's beliefs about faith, positive thinking, thought power, and failure clearly have their origins in the New Thought movement, as does some of his language that he uses, like infinite intelligence, universal mind, thought vibrations, frequencies, thoughts becoming things, just to name a few. Not only this.
So have you heard any of those, Mr. Cody? Any of those phrases?
Yeah, the law of attraction and all that. I mean, I used to actually kind of try to make all that stuff happen. I mean, manifestation and all that. But
where'd you hear it from? Because I heard it from this book.
For years.
I heard it from this book, so I'm curious where you heard it from.
I feel like the law of attraction thing was on like Sam Tripoli. Do you know who that is? He was talking about it years ago. But then manifestation and like Neville Goddard.
Neville Goddard,
old,
I have
like
heard
self-help.
that term. Yeah.
He was an old self-help guy. But I think it really is real. It does work, but it comes at a cost.
What would the cost be?
Well, So like I always say, thoughts are demons, right? So like whenever you imagine these things and try to manifest them and make them real, those demons want paid back at some point.
Interesting.
Whereas when you just let things come, it's like you get rid of your thoughts, right? You let God impose his will on you. There's no debt in that because that's his will. Like, so like you're getting what God wants you to have, and God doesn't require you to pay him back. And manifestation, like you're kind of forcing the universe to do what you want.
I was never
But
convinced it worked.
You have to pay those demons back eventually.
Okay. Interestingly, she actually says the same thing in her book, or something very similar, that she was able to make manifestation happen once, but it was like demonic. And she didn't recommend it. It's a shortcut. It's kind of like taking steroids. Was kind of her view on it.
Yeah.
I never was really convinced that it worked.
I think the same thing with cars. Like, so if you go take out a loan on a car, right?
Yeah.
It's
The interest makes you pay for it like 3 times over, but they never tell you that.
It's literally like spiritually cursed. Like
really?
When you hold debt on something, like if you go buy a new car, you might as well go hit it with a hammer because you're gonna get like a dent or something. Something's gonna happen to you in that car. It's gonna get messed up. And so, but like if you work for it and like it's not blood money, it's not.
It's like the bird pooping on it right after the car wash. Like every time you go to the car wash.
Muslims call it haram, but it's like blood money. It's like
interesting.
It's because you didn't work for it. It's not you didn't put in your effort for it, right? So it's like it's kind of stolen to the universe.
It like unbalances the universe somehow. So you've got to like make it. They got to make you pay for it. That's hilarious. I don't know if that's true, but that's really funny. That makes so Turtle Chief says mental health can be the cost. Don't take out a loan on a car. Well, the interest, I would think the interest would be enough to restore the balance, but apparently we got to have dents and bird poop as well. Yeah. So, but interestingly, the Bible does say no interest. Oh, don't say that. I don't. Making me superstitious now. I don't like it.
Like somebody's gonna door ding you, something like that.
Oh gosh, that would stink.
It always happens every time, dude.
Isn't that Murphy's Law? Like, are we talking like Murphy's Law?
Is it? I don't know what that is.
Murphy's Law is if it can go wrong, it will.
Well, that's a bit nihilistic.
Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's Murphy's Law.
I get is that just the law of entropy?
I don't know. I just figured, cynicism, like the general law being a cynic. So, but it's kind of
entropy. Everything does break down at some point.
Yes, entropy. That's true. Yeah, second law of thermodynamics type stuff. Things do break down over time. Does bird poop fall under that category, though? I don't know.
I don't know.
The general accumulation of bird poop and car dents creates balance in the universe. All right, moving on. Let's see if we can get. There's some stuff that she does that's really funny in it, but it shows some of the creepy cult stories. And I wanted to try to get to it, but it's taking longer than I wanted it to.
Remember Rosalie? She was drinking deeply from the well of new thought and was.
Rosalie was wife number 4, by the way, just so we're clear.
A member,
Rosalie O'Donnell,
a deeply involved member in that creepy metaphysical cult. But my theory is that Think and Grow Rich was a smashing success, probably because of Rosalie. Napoleon Hill, not a very good writer, and a lot of his books didn't do very well outside of this one. She was the secret sauce. Not only was she a good editor and writer, but her beliefs and spirituality were also shared throughout the pages of Think and Grow Rich. So let's get down to some of these New Thought beliefs in Think and Grow Rich. The foundational basis for Think and Grow Rich is to master the principles in it. It's not just a book that you read
So the thing I was wanting to bring up,
one that you read every day.
Because we must have skipped it, because I got impatient. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the cult that she was in. So give me a second to find that. That's a different one.
She was in a cult, huh?
Well, he was in a cult. She was in a cult. They're all in a cult. Just big culty cult. So I'm going to be honest. I kind of wonder if this was an op. Like I was talking to Jess about it, and this sounds kind of crazy, and I need to do more research to confirm it. But I'm kind of suspecting an op because it was called the Royal Fraternity of the Master Metaphysicians, and it was led by James Bernard Schaefer, who, if I remember correctly, if I've got my facts correct, him and his wife were later murder-suicide, like part of a murder-suicide. So there's like weird stuff going on there. So he was part of this weird fraternity with the murder-suicide cult leader. And this would have been in the 1930s, interestingly. Yes, here we go. I believe this is the news article from the New York Times. Yeah, this is the same guy. We've updated our terms. I don't care. Oh, they're not going to let me read any of it. Yeah, it says they were found dead. Yeah, once ran metaphysical order. So yes, this is the same Schaefer and his wife suicided years later. And this was, part of the thing that cult was, Hill was under.
Gotta pay back the demons.
Or the CIA, maybe both.
Same thing, bro.
Yeah. So what was the other? There was something else. Rosalie. I was looking for Rosalie. Not Rosalie, the baby. The other thing that was interesting about this, here we go. The Immortal Baby Gene. This is a 5-minute video about the time that this cult tried to buy a baby, and Napoleon Hill was the godfather. Now, Melissa Daughtry goes through all of this, but apparently I lost it because I'm a maroon. So we'll just watch this guy's brief little video on that really quick.
Hi, I'm Chris Sangster, and welcome back to the studio.
What a beard.
I'm jealous. No, I will not help you. None. Neither. You make me buy car insurance, and I resent you for it.
I want to tell you a story. The story of the immortal baby Gene. Picture it, New York City, 1939. A secretive cult known as the Royal Fraternity of Master Metaphysicians coerces a struggling new mother into turning over the guardianship of her newborn baby to the group and their leader, James Bernard Schaefer. The baby, named Gene, was brought to the group's luxurious Long Island mansion, which was the former Vanderbilt mansion. And the cult had dubbed this place Peace
Nothing
Haven.
weird there.
It was here at Peace Haven that they would announce their intentions in adopting a newborn. They were going to raise an immortal human. That's right. Baby Gene was never to learn of death or disease, nor would she ever be exposed to unkind words or thoughts. She would follow a strict diet, never ingesting meat, mustard, vinegar, or spices. And as she aged, she was never to consume coffee, tea, alcohol, or tobacco. A group of nurses were to attend to her around the clock and give her constant care and instruction in Schaefer's philosophies. By following these guidelines to the letter, Schaefer believed they would be able to raise an immortal human, and that he would be able to groom the next leader of his cult, a leader that would live forever. However, it was only 15 months before that plan unraveled. Gene's mother sued the master metaphysicians for fraud and demanded the return of her child. The group acquiesced under mounting legal pressure, and within days of baby Gene's reunion with her mother, Schaefer was in court to defend himself against charges of grand larceny. Yet he did not completely give up hope of Gene's immortality. When he sent her home to live with her parents, he included detailed instructions so that Gene's parents could continue what he started. Schaefer told the press at the time, whether Gene goes on being immortal is for her parents to decide. Okay, buddy. James Schaefer was just one in a long line of con men looking to exploit people's search for spiritual fulfillment.
All right, so that's the story. That's the long and short of it.
So where's the baby now?
She went home with the mom. I don't know where she is now. We'll see. What's her name?
She's probably still alive, yeah?
We could probably Google it. Let's see.
And she's immortal, obviously.
Oh, obviously. I mean, it worked like a charm. Let me Google it really quick. So,
okay, baby G.
Is baby Gene still alive? AI doesn't know. Oh my goodness. Baby Gene died.
Oh shit.
Unless
Didn't
it's a
take.
different Baby Gene. I don't know.
Just
Google can only tell us so much.
it didn't take, Gary.
Well, apparently it didn't work for Schaefer either, because the CIA got tired of him. So, all right, let's see. Let's see if I can find the quote now. That was all I wanted to really bring up. I just thought that was fascinating. Like, the idea that this guy that Dave Ramsey's quoting, you know, is
Like a
part of
straight-up
like,
Satanist.
yeah, he's like a straight up Satanist. It's like, guys, this is embarrassing. Let's stop. Turtle Chief says she's immortally alive somewhere. I guess that's true. All
Only
right.
if reincarnation's real.
She can be in heaven. Never know.
Maybe.
Let's see. We're close enough to it. We'll just play it from here. Hang on.
Of your life.
quotes are
throughout
great.
your
I wanna
life.
get
It's
to the
designed
quotes.
like that. Sort of like the Bible. As mentioned in this synopsis, the pinnacle and climactic lesson of this entire book is what the Napster calls the secrets. Remember, Napoleon Hill claims that the secret to infinite riches was passed on to him by the great spiritual sage, Andrew Carnegie, and although he spends the introduction being unnecessarily mysterious about it, he never actually explicitly mentions what the secret is. But then again, as I went over before, he sort of does. Instead, he leaves clues throughout the book, saying that it's mentioned at least once in every chapter. Now, we've already gone over his non-association with Andrew Carnegie, but just to put this in context, let me read this excerpt from the book to you. In every chapter of this book, mention has been made of the money-making secret which has made fortunes for more than 500 exceedingly wealthy men, whom I have carefully analyzed over a long period of years. The secret was brought to my attention by Andrew Carnegie more than a quarter of a century ago. The canny, lovable old Scotsman carelessly tossed it into my mind when I was but a boy. Then he sat back in his chair with a merry twinkle in his eye and watched carefully to see if I had the brains to understand the full significance of what he had said to me. When he saw that I had grasped the idea, he asked if I would be willing to spend 20 years or more preparing myself to take it to the world, to men and women who without the secret might go through life as failures. Sorry, I'm being unnecessarily dramatic. Okay, hold on. I said
I couldn't tell.
I would. And with
What?
Mr.
Nah, it's
Carnegie's
fine.
cooperation, I have kept my promise. This book contains the secrets. After having been put to a practical test by thousands of people in almost every walk of life. It was Mr. Carnegie's idea that the magic formula, which gave him a stupendous fortune, ought to be placed within reach of people who do not have time to investigate how men make money. And it was his hope that I might test and demonstrate the soundness of the formula through the experience of men and women in every calling. He believed the formula should be taught in all public schools and colleges, and expressed the opinion that if it were properly taught, it would be so it would so revolutionize the entire educational system that the time spent in school could be reduced to less than half. That was a little too fun to read. I mean, this is brilliant marketing. Don't you think? This is the allure of so many New Thought beliefs in general. Doesn't this make you want to know more? Are you one of the smart ones who can figure it out? I want to be one of the smart ones that figures it out. And
You're not interested, Cody? You're not salivating over the secret?
No, I think just the story about this guy, like, oh, I'll do the thing you want me to do for 20 years. How about you chase your own dream, you gamma? Have you ever heard Owen describe what a gamma male is?
No, well, I think I have, but you probably will do it better. So how about you describe what a gamma male is? I don't remember what it is.
A gamma is like the specialist boy, you know?
Okay.
Think like the most intense youth pastor you've ever seen. Okay? But he's like...
You mean the
he
Metro
really-
guy with my kind of hair, only in jean shorts?
Yes.
Okay.
And he really seeks like old ladies' approval and really likes young girls. That's what this guy seems
Oh,
like
this is
to
getting
me.
dark. Okay, so he's like seeking old ladies' approval and likes young ladies too much.
Yes.
Okay,
Like, Owen does a better job of describing a
I
gamma
gotcha.
male, but
I gotcha. No,
does.
I just find it incredibly suspect. What's interesting is there's no record of this. Andrew Carnegie has no record of it. None of the people he says he met have any record of it, which I didn't know. And you would think that the Christians that are pushing this would, somebody would have done research. I guess that's what threw me off, because his claims are so outlandish that you're thinking, well, surely somebody would have called him out if it was all fake. Like, you wouldn't have the likes of Dave Ramsey's and other people, like, advocating for this guy if it was a ruse. But apparently nobody vetted this guy. And now we have the internet, and apparently he was on the run, or at least under investigation at the time he was supposed to be Andrew Carnegie and had to pick up a new name. And he's part of this creepy cult that the CIA may or may not have killed the leader of. And they tried to buy a baby. And you don't know any of that. And you're just like, is nobody checking anything anymore?
yeah. He's just like he was a. I mean, it's hard to be a snake oil salesman with the internet, but like,
Yeah.
that's what this guy was. He's just, and man, you can't chase other people's dreams. That's ridiculous. It doesn't work.
Yeah. The idea of doing that for 20 years does seem insane.
Yeah.
Turtle Chief says the secret is too culty. But bum. Was that a joke? I think that was a joke.
I don't know.
I think that was a pun. I don't know. Culty. I thought for a second I thought he
No.
said salty, and I was like, "What are you
Well,
talking?" No, it's
culty
culty.
is hidden, so the secret is too hidden.
The secret is
Trevor-
too hidden to be found. But he said it in the first sentence of the book. Thoughts are things. That's the secret. I
Well,
guess.
you can make them things, but you got to pay it back. And that's what he's not telling anybody. He's like, hey, you can do this, and you're going to win. But it's going to bite you in the ass bad.
I guess I never understood it because I never actually tried to do the manifestation stuff. And I was always a little dubious about the... thank you, Trevor. He's like, yay, you got it. I'm like, yay, I did it. Anyway. All right. No, I never tried any of that stuff. And I always thought it was a little odd. But I was like, there's got to be something here. Because why
There
would
is.
everybody be recommending it? You know? And
It's the way of the world, man. It's like, it's why Jesus said, be in the world, not of it.
yeah. All right, let's go on. Let's see if we can find his story about Abraham Lincoln.
It's
like the best.
man.
It's the system, man. All right.
Anyways, as I mentioned in the synopsis, he gives away the secret literally in the first line of the first chapter. It's that thoughts are things. Now, someone familiar with the history of New Thought or with New Thought writings in general will immediately understand exactly what this
Every
phrase
time somebody
means.
brings up Abraham Lincoln, it makes
And-
me want to watch that The Whitest Kids You Know skit on Abraham Lincoln. Oh,
I'm going to beat him to death with this hammer. It's a good sketch.
oh man. Those guys were great.
Yeah. Oh, I miss it.
I wish they hadn't killed Trevor more.
Yeah, I keep hearing that they killed him, but I don't know why people are saying that, but
Allegedly.
allegedly.
I mean, didn't he fall out of a window? I mean,
That's what I heard. I heard he fell out of something, but
Kind of sketchy.
yeah, it is. But all right, let's see what she elaborates on thoughts or things, and we'll try to do the Abraham Lincoln thing. Things and thoughts. Think about things and thoughts. Which think about things and thoughts. Which think about things and thoughts. Which think about things and thoughts, and so on.
Yeah, like Alan Watts said, if all you have to think about is thoughts. Wait, if all you do is think, all you have to think about is thoughts. You have to do stuff.
Gotcha. All right, here we go.
That it's a fundamental New Thought teaching. But because New Thought has more influence than recognition, most readers will just skirt right over this. But thoughts are things, that phrase, is like one of the 10 commandments for the New Thought movement. Also, interestingly, one of the people who was greatly influenced by Napoleon Hill was New Thought guru Bob Proctor, who wrote a book by the same name. Because remember, according to New Thought, your mental life is an expression of the material world. Your mental life, your thoughts create your reality. I mentioned this already in the synopsis, but basically the secret that Napoleon Hill is talking about is the law of attraction. I have an entire chapter in my book that talks about the law of attraction and manifestation, affirmations, visualization, but we are talking about a spiritual belief that uses biblical words and principles, but the actual concept comes straight from hell. What the law of attraction teachers don't tell you until you're ready or whatever is that the reason why everything responds to your thoughts, emotions, and feelings is because you are God. You are a divine being that can manifest your reality. You cannot divorce this from the law of attraction. You cannot divorce this from the teachings of Napoleon Hill. But
Trevor, you middle schooler. And yes, this is a new doctor. The new Dr. Seuss book, and then LOL, she said, but.
You're ridiculous, Trevor.
Thank you. I couldn't have said it better. Silliness.
remember, there is a catch. You have to be ready for it.
So what is that? Have you heard that whole "we are like little gods" thing? Like I heard a couple Pentecostal people say that over the years. I don't know exactly what they mean. Like if they mean Thor or what, but
You ever seen Nine?
Nine, yes, years ago once.
Little sock puppets.
Yeah,
And the creator of the sock puppets put his essence into those puppets.
ah,
I think that's kind of the thought behind this. But
it seems
in a way
very
we do have-
Hindu-esque.
Yeah,
in that
a way we do
respect.
have creative power, but I mean, calling yourself God is ridiculous because, like I said, we're corrupted by thoughts, so which are attached to our fleshly desires. So we can't really interpret what God's will is without Him doing it.
Yeah. All right. Okay,
Yeah,
let's see.
I'm just gonna be saying the same thing over and over again, I guess.
All right, let me try to get to the the Abraham Lincoln story, because it's just ridiculous. I don't know why. Come on. Show the ad if you're going to show the ad. There
Information
we
from
go.
the collective mind, I guess that made sense in Napster land. But there's another interesting point about this. Napoleon Hill says in this chapter that these are imagined meetings because the assumption...
Okay, let me just set it up because it's close enough. So in chapter, I guess 9, I think, or there's a chapter where he starts talking about the sixth sense. It's not 9. I think I just thought that because you said 9.
Okay.
But in one of the chapters, he starts talking about the sixth sense. Don't know what he's talking about, but this is where he brings up his infamous cabinet, you know. And this is where he brings Voltaire, I don't know, Gandhi or whoever. Gandhi probably wasn't dead back then. But, you know, like just all these different famous figures. They don't really probably have like a similar ideology at all. But he's saying, and this is really like the weird inconsistency with it, like he's saying that he's listening to these great thinkers and they're giving him advice as if there's some kind of higher collective consciousness that he can tap into if he imagines these people hard enough. So like if he's imagining what Abraham Lincoln would say, then somehow I guess Abraham Lincoln or whoever will tell him what Abraham Lincoln would say if he reaches up high enough or thinks hard enough and taps into this higher level of consciousness or whatever.
Did you hear
some
it
sort
said
of
there?
collective
He
consciousness.
thinks hard enough?
Yeah, if he thinks hard enough. I get what you're saying, but everything I said in the prayer conversation still stands. I mean, I agree with you, but you're right. It's the problem is it's all still going to be him. Like the idea that Voltaire wouldn't want to be in the same vicinity of Christ, like wouldn't want to be in the same room with him, probably never dawned on him, you know, unless he was wanting like an antagonist for his little group or whatever. So like at the end of the day, though, it's still just him talking to himself. But he starts to think that other beings are kind of talking to him. It was his imagination, but it wasn't his imagination.
Yeah.
You know, and that
like
kind of
DMT,
thing.
how you talk to the Clockwork Elves.
Oh yes, the Clockwork Elves. I've heard of those. I don't know what the story is, but I've heard of them in
I don't
passing.
know. It's on Joe Rogan.
Although I do think that there is something to that, because you've got people that are like outside. They're like different people seeing the same thing, even though they've taken DMT. But I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I
there
think
might
it
be
is
something.
another realm. It's another layer of reality, but it's demons.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. I think it's demonic stuff. So
Yeah.
All right.
Mushrooms, the same thing. Don't do mushrooms.
yeah, I would imagine that would be a bad idea. So
Yeah. I did them for a long time.
yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because I had a theory about mushrooms. I think that I don't think they create hallucinations, because I don't know how chaotic chemicals can create like orderly images and information. It's like in a dream you can't read, you know what I mean? Because your brain can't really like make information. At least that's what I've heard. Anyway, so in order, what I think is actually going on with the mushrooms is they're like turning off certain inhibitors, because your brain has things that keep you from seeing too much lest you get overstimulated. So I think you have like natural inhibitors in your mind. I think essentially because those mushrooms are in some measure killing you, like they're a poison. Like that's turning off those inhibitors, and that's allowing you to see more, perhaps. But that might not be a good thing. Since you've taken mushrooms, you tell me, is that in the ballpark or not?
Well, I think you see, like, I mean, we've talked about this on previous episodes, but I think magnetics plays a huge role in everything around us. And like your pupils get huge when you're on mushrooms, right?
Okay.
You can see more. You can see more like magnetic layers of reality.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's your brain just interpreting, because like your traumas manifest as like little creatures and stuff, right? And like
Your trauma is manifest as little creatures. Like, what does that mean?
yeah, like you can. My wife tells a great story about it. I never got a lot of visuals out of it. But my wife tells a great story about how she saw little goblins, and whenever she admitted a wrong, then the little goblin it gave her a flower and showed her it was non-threatening. So like her trauma was threatening at first, and then when she faced it, and like told the truth about it, it was less threatening. Right.
So was the
So, like-
goblin real, or was it like subjective, like some kind of representation?
I can't say.
Okay.
Don't know. But I don't know. It shows you truths, but it also makes you very influenceable. So like I don't know. It's a fungus, man. You shouldn't put fungus in your body, because parasites and fungus are synonymous with each other.
Okay.
And the only real way to fix yourself is with God. Straight up.
Well, I wasn't necessarily dealing with a temptation to put fungus in my body, but if I ever get tempted, then I think you're right.
Yeah. I don't know. It is cool. It shows you cool things, but it messes you up for a while. Like you have to heal from the mushrooms themselves. I mean, after you do them.
Yeah, I figured they would damage you somehow. I just didn't know what all that would be.
Yeah.
So
I'm not entirely sure, but I do get a bad feeling about it now.
Yeah.
Looking back.
Gotcha. All right. Well, speaking of bad feelings, let's hear what Abraham Lincoln has to say to Napoleon Hill, if I can find it.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Do you like Abraham Lincoln?
Is that
I do. Greg doesn't, but I do.
Yeah, I don't like him.
I know. That's a whole other conversation. It gets into the Civil War, and I'm like, Razor Fist has a video on that.
I love Razor Fist video on Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
one of my favorite videos in the world.
There was a time I had refutations for all that, but it's been years and years. Like when I was, I guess, like 14 or 15, I had a friend who was real big into the Confederacy. And we would argue and argue and argue. I'd be for the North and he'd be for the South, and it was just like this whole thing. It's like, and I had all this stuff memorized at one point, but I was 14 and I'm 36, so I'd have to go and look at all that again.
I feel like the South was industrializing faster than the government could. Like, it was making more money than the government was, and the government was becoming useless. And so it had to handicap that industry in the South.
It's, ironically, I would argue that slavery was being used a lot like immigration is being used today. That was the whole issue. They were breeding slaves and then sending them into the slave states to get more representation in Congress, if I remember correctly. And so that's like, if you want to understand the Civil War, again, 20-year-old memories, you need to look into Bleeding Kansas and the Missouri Compromise to really get why it happened. And a lot of it is the South moving slaves into slave states to get more representation. And then it's also the fact that the North started doing all these tariffs, trying to curtail the South's breeding of slaves, trying to keep that economy poor. But of course, the South was just able to dump all that hardship onto the farmers, which ticked the farmers off. And that's in that third, like, because only like, I don't remember if it was 3% or 13% of the South actually owned slaves. Like, it was a dramatic minority. But those tariffs hit the white farmer the hardest. Didn't actually go after the plantation owners. They were taxing like implements and stuff like over 100%. Yeah, I don't remember the particulars. I just know they hit the farmers really hard, but that wasn't what they were trying to do at the time. They were trying to stop the Southern aristocracy from taking over the Congress, but they just ended up taking up the farmers. If anything, I would say it's like why sanctions and economic warfare is a bad idea when you're trying to stop a problem, because the poor people always get hit by that, and they never blame the government you're trying to overthrow. They always blame the people that implement the economic hardship. Yeah. So I think there's like a whole government debate that could be had about that. Like sanctions and stuff like that are just a bad idea. But again, going off memory from stuff I studied 20 years ago. Yeah. So, but yeah, bottom line is, as for Lincoln himself, I would say he was always an abolitionist. I don't think he always believed in like African Americans being equal. Like, I don't think he thought that. But I think, again, my opinion, based on stuff I read years ago, I think he saw his dad get very bitter because his dad kept having to move, and I know they spent some time in the South, and I don't think they could compete with the Southern farmers. So I think Lincoln saw what slavery was doing economically to everybody else, and I think he probably wanted to get rid of it for that reason. And so he was talking to abolitionists because they called him the ape man. Like that famous quote that Razor Fist always points out. But I don't remember. It was during the Stephen Douglas debate the debate he had with Stephen Douglas. He quotes how he wouldn't want to get rid of slavery and all this. It was a lie, but it was in reaction, if I remember correctly, it was a reaction to Douglas calling him the ape man. Now, he wasn't calling him the ape man because he was ugly. He was calling him the ape man because he was talking to African-American abolitionists. Douglas had caught him doing that and called him out. That's from what I understand. And so Lincoln was basically overreacting, like basically lying to the public, and everybody knew he was lying. That's why he lost the debate. But that quote is him basically trying to cover his butt because Douglas called him out for talking to abolitionists. So I think Lincoln was trying to talk in secret to these guys, but he was seen doing so, and he had an association of interacting with African Americans, which is why they called him the ape man. So again, I'd have to check all that because it's like 20-year-old. I haven't studied it in years, but yeah, if memory serves me correct, that's how that went. And so I do think that Abraham Lincoln changed his mind over time. I think Frederick Douglass kind of slowly persuaded him. And I don't I couldn't say exactly when it happened, but I think he did have an epiphany at some point, because if you compare his debate with Stephen Douglas compared to what he says during his second inaugural address, like, if you understand theology, that is not something you would say after just winning an election, because he says, I'm going to butcher the quote, but I'm going to try to get it right. If every lash of the whip must be met with the slash of the sword, then we must say what was said 1,000 years ago: the decrees of the Lord are good and just altogether. Now, if you understand theology, that's like basically insulting the people that voted for you. He's basically saying this is the wrath of God, and we have to accept it. That is not something you tell your demographic if you're wanting to gain favor with them.
Is you or is you ain't my constituents?
Yeah, like that was a very, like, if you really think about it, that was a kind of an insulting thing to say to the people that voted for him. And I think he said that because he was basically taking the moral stance that, we should never have implemented slavery, and we're paying for it. Like, this is what's we're going through right now is the wrath of God, and we have to accept whatever comes, basically.
I mean,
that's a flip compared to where he was with Stephen Douglas.
Your comparison to the immigration thing right now, I mean, we're paying for that, because, like, the whole, everybody's mad, like, if you're, like a year ago, if you're an illegal, you walk over here and get like $4,000, and medical benefits. Like, the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just that idea of putting the blame on the people. Like, you wouldn't do that if you're just trying to schmooze up to your constituents,
Yeah.
So, I think he had a change of heart, but I don't think it was sincere at the beginning necessarily, or at least it wasn't about equality at the beginning necessarily.
I do want to add, he's the only one we have a giant stone statue of on a throne.
I don't think he can be faulted with that because he was dead when they made it.
Yeah, but why would that be? Because he made the government lots and lots of money.
I don't know. I don't know why that is.
Because he implemented income tax in 1866.
I don't think that's right. Income tax?
Yeah.
Gosh, where's Trevor? We need somebody to Google that, because I am almost certain income tax is 19th Amendment. Not 19th. 21st. It's 1911. Hang on, I'm looking this up. This is driving me nuts because you said it several times. So, we're getting on another diatribe, but okay. When was the income tax created or established in the U.S.? Let's put it that way.
In 1866, federal internal revenue collections reached a high of over $310 million, the highest in the nation's history at the time.
You're right.
This was due in part to the first income tax, which was passed in 1861 to help fund the Civil War.
You are right, sir. I stand
Abraham
corrected.
Lincoln.
1862. Then what did Woodrow Wilson put in place?
What year?
Well, I thought it was 1914. Let me see. Did
19.
Woodrow Wilson implement... Yeah, they implement the income tax. Yeah, well, that's weird. So it's saying Abraham Lincoln did it, and then it's also saying that Woodrow Wilson did it in 1913. So what in the world is the difference between the two?
Got me.
Okay, we'll explore this in another episode. We've got to finish the Napoleon Hill thing, but
yeah, let's go back.
Yeah, the correct answer, ladies and gentlemen, is both. I don't know how, but it's both. So.
All presidents are scumbags. Who knew?
All right. That's crazy. Well, I learned something today. Anyway, let's see this dream about Abraham Lincoln.
Access to these people. However, if these were imaginary meetings, and if some of these men were still alive, and he was apparently buddy-buddy with them, couldn't he have actually met with them instead of imagining his creepy cabinet? I mean, that's just an interesting inconsistency there, but keeping in mind Napoleon's belief about us all being able to tap into this infinite intelligence, can you see how he might have believed that's exactly what he was doing when he was having these conversations, because the deepest, truest part of you is spirit, which you access through the mind. Your body, on the other hand, is seen as a barrier to this connection, which is why you're encouraged to turn it off. From Napoleon's perspective, grounded in New Thought beliefs, it makes perfect sense to me that he would view his imagination as a way to access the infinite mind or infinite intelligence. In other words, in his view, these conversations he describes as imaginary are actually real interactions with this higher intelligence. Framing it this way is a clever move. It allows him to appear grounded and not crazy, while still presenting himself as deeply spiritual. This approach aligns perfectly with New Thought's emphasis on imagination as a bridge to higher consciousness. Now, people might think that this is super spiritual or whatever, but it sounds flat out delusional. But I think he knew exactly how this would sound, which is why he is speaking out of both sides of his mouth. They can't be his cabinet members. They can't be imaginary and true at the same time. To give you an example of this, let me read an excerpt to you from his book. Also, if you have this book, I actually encourage you to go read this entire section for the complete context of what he's saying here. But this is what he says starting on page 254. He's speaking about his cabinet members here, okay? These meetings became so realistic that I started to be fearful of their consequences and discontinued them for several months. The experiences were so uncanny, I was afraid if I continued them, I would lose sight of the fact that the meetings were purely experiences of my imagination. Some 6 months after I discontinued the practice, I was awakened one night, or thought I was, and saw Lincoln standing at my bedside. He said, "The world will soon need your services. It is about to undergo a period of chaos that will cause men and women to lose faith and become panic-stricken. Go ahead with your work and complete your philosophy. That is your mission in life. If you neglect it, for any cause whatsoever, you will be reduced to a primal state." The following morning, I was unable to tell whether I had dreamed this or had been actually awake. I don't know which one it was, but it was so vivid in my mind that the next day I resumed my meetings at night. I began to add new members to my cabinet. Now it consists of more than 50, among them Christ, St. Paul, Galileo, Copernicus, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Homer, Voltaire, Bruno. And then on the next page, page 256, he says this: "Lest I be misunderstood, I wish here to state most emphatically that I still regard my cabinet meetings as purely imaginary, but I feel entitled to also suggest that they have led me into glorious paths of adventure." Do you see what I mean about the double?
That's not Lincoln, it's a demon. Okay, sorry, were you going to say something? Yeah.
100. No, yeah, I was going to say what you just said. He's communing with demons and like just calling them like people. And he said he's afraid about the consequences of his little cabinet meetings in his head. That's because you have to pay demons back.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I agree. It's like, what are you doing, man? Stop it. But this is a Christian book, Cody. I don't know how I didn't see it. It's like the church is like, read this. This will show you how to be successful at business. And it's like, yeah, because you made a deal with Satan, I guess. I don't know. So I will not be reading Think and Grow Rich again anytime in the future. So,
Right. Yeah.
All right, so that is the end of this segment. We're not going anywhere. We still got another 2 segments, but I wanted to wrap this one up. I just wanted to end with the Abraham Lincoln thing because that was just silly. So, yeah. Any final thoughts on that, Mr. Cody?
I don't think so. I'm getting pretty excited to talk about Brandon Biggs, though.
Oh, yeah, you're just salivating over that opportunity.
Gnawing at the bit.
Yeah, gnawing at the bit. All right. Well, we'll move on to part 3 then. We got Epstein, then Biggs. So, for now, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.